Welcome to Once Upon a Screen Time. Today I have chosen to do a mini-series, all of it, and this is part 1 of The Thief, His Wife and the Canoe. Enjoy. Once upon a time, in a land not so far away called England, there lived a man named John Darwin. Now, John wasn't your typical fairy tale hero with his shining armor and noble deeds. No, John was a debt-ridden, delusionally ambitious husband with a terrible idea. This is a story where our protagonist isn't saving a damsel or fighting a dragon, but instead fighting off his creditors with the world's worst scheme. John is a man with a plan, a canoe, and absolutely no exit strategy. Welcome to The Thief, His Wife, and the Canoe, where the closest thing to magic is disappearing off the coast and hoping for the best. Prepare yourself for a tale of lies so ridiculous you'll question reality, love, and maybe even your own life choices. Let's dive into the first part of this twisted fairy tale where happily ever after is a little less about love and more about faking your own death. Our story begins with John Darwin, a man in financial quicksand who decides that the best way to climb out of debt is by staging his own disappearance. John, a former prison officer with no sense of irony, is stuck with bills that pile up faster than his empty promises. He has a knack for bad decision-making and a canoe just waiting for adventure. Naturally, in John's mind, there's one solution to his financial problems: fake his death in a canoeing accident. Because nothing says hero like abandoning your family and defrauding the insurance company. And thus, with the confidence of a man who thinks he's 10 steps ahead, John begins his journey, dragging his wife, Anne, down this incredibly twisted rabbit hole of deception. Now think about this. If your husband's grand plan involves a canoe and an insurance payout, maybe reevaluate your marriage. In every fairy tale, there's a loyal, if somewhat reluctant sidekick, and this story, that's Anne Darwin. Anne is John's wife, as we said, a woman who seems as baffled by her husband's schemes as the audience. She's the one left to clean up the emotional and financial mess John leaves behind, which is only made worse when he convinces her to play along in the great canoe disappearance scheme. Anne, in the beginning, tries to be the voice of reason, questioning John's sanity and gently pointing out that this plan is insane. But with all fairy tale sidekicks, she's reluctantly pulled into his chaotic world, becoming an accomplice to his plot. Before long, Anne is lying to everyone she knows, including her own sons, who believe their father is dead and gone. It's a plot twist worthy of a soap opera, and Anne is forced to wear the burden of deceit like a crown of thorns. And so, the grand plan is set in motion. John takes his canoe, paddles out into the great unknown, and disappears. Or at least that's what he hopes people will think. In reality, John doesn't make it very far. He disappears for just long enough to convince Anne to report him missing, before sneaking back to hide in a nearby rental property that they own. And by nearby, I mean next door. Next door. Meanwhile, Anne has the harrowing task of reporting her own husband missing. A scene filled with Oscar-worthy acting as she delivers the news with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. To the outside world, Anne is a widow, and John's tragic death in the ocean is treated as a great loss. Meanwhile, John is hanging out not so far away, smugly patting himself on the back for his brilliant plan. In all honesty, if you're going to fake your own death, maybe just try going a little bit further than next door. John's disappearance isn't as seamless as he hoped. While everyone else thinks he's dead, John is hiding out like a suburban phantom, popping up around town under various disguises. As it turns out, hiding in plain sight is both challenging and incredibly awkward. Meanwhile, Anne is trying to keep up the charade, facing daily inquiries from families, friends, and insurance agents. She is forced to keep up appearances, balancing grief with the crushing weight of a lie that grows more absurd by the day. John's entire plan hinges on one thing: a hefty insurance payout that will supposedly solve all his financial woes. After months of playing the grieving widow, Anne finally cashes in on John's life insurance policy, raking in enough money to get them out of debt and then some. The payout is the treasure chest at the end of this twisted treasure hunt, the reward for months of deception. As they celebrate their ill-gotten gains, there's an underlying tension. Anne is filled with guilt, grappling with the lies she's told her family and the trauma she's inflicted on her own sons. John, on the other hand, is basking in the glow of success, oblivious to the moral and emotional wreckage around him. He's convinced that they pulled off the heist of the century, a masterful plan that's left him rich and, for now, free from suspicion. I must say, if your reward requires a lifetime of lying, it's probably not worth it. While John and Anne live out their twisted fairy tale, there are two unknowing victims of the scheme, their sons, Mark and Anthony. They believe their father is dead, and Anne is forced to keep up the charade, pretending to grieve while lying to their faces. The emotional toll on Anne is immense, but John, with all the empathy of a rock, brushes it off as a necessary evil act. Mark and Anthony are devastated, their lives forever changed by a tragedy that didn't even happen. They go through the grieving process, never suspecting that their father is alive and lurking nearby. It's a tragic subplot in this otherwise ridiculous tale, a reminder of the real cost of John's deception. With the insurance money in hand, John decides it's time to really disappear. He and Anne concoct a plan to move to Panama, where they'll live out their days in a tropical paradise, far from prying eyes of their neighbors. In John's mind, this is the ultimate escape, a final act that will cement his genius and allow them to live happily ever after. But as they begin their new life in Panama, cracks start to show. The guilt is eating away at Anne, and the logistics of keeping up the lie are becoming overwhelming. John, ever the dreamer, thinks they can start fresh, but Anne is drowning in the weight of their deceit. They are living in a paradise built on lies, and it's only a matter of time before it all comes crashing down. Moral of the story: if you need to flee to another country to avoid getting caught, then your plan isn't foolproof. It's just a ticking time bomb. And so, we reach the end of our twisted fairy tale, or at least the beginning of John and Anne's life of deception. The Thief, His Wife, and the Canoe is a story of audacity, greed, and the lengths people will go to avoid responsibility. It's a tale about the dangers of chasing money and the cost of deception, and the sheer absurdity of faking your own death. John's tale isn't one of heroism or courage, but of reckless ambition and an insatiable desire for an easy way out. It's a modern-day fairy tale where the hero is a villain, and the wife is a reluctant accomplice, and the happy ending is anything but. So remember, if you ever find yourself dreaming of a fresh start, maybe skip the canoe and try a real solution. It's the end right now, but we have a part 2, the final part, which is available now. If you find yourself lost a little bit, the link is in the description.